Hello everyone and welcome to another video. Now the 4GB GTX 1050 Ti here launched alongside the 2GB 1050 back in late 2016 and both were decent low cost gaming graphics cards. Today we're revisiting the superior of the two products, something we've done every now and then over the past 8.5 years. I was a sprightly young 22-year-old boy when this card came out, now I'm a decrepit 30-year-old man. Hopefully this card has held up better than I have over the last near decade. I have the MSI Gaming X model here, which requires a 6-pin connector, whereas a lot of variants don't. That's what I've always liked about the 1050 Ti. You could add one to an old OEM PC and instantly turn it into a budget gaming rig on a limited budget. The 6-pin versions sort of limited that a little more, but hey, I still really like this one. It has the classic black and red MSI colour scheme along with some LED lighting. What's more, the fans stop under low load, and even when gaming it is pretty cool and very quiet. From what I've seen here in the UK, the newer and better 1650, to name one example, sells for similar money on the used market, and that could be true where you live as well, so always be sure to check out the prices of other GPUs, especially if you're on a particularly tight budget. The 1050 Ti still supports the latest Nvidia driver at the time of this video, 576.28, which is what I've used, but let's see it in action. We'll go easy on this old thing to start with. With that, Counter-Strike 2 is up first, 1080p with the medium preset here with 2x MSAA. Now, it defaults to the high preset, but I thought that medium was a nice sort of sweet spot. It shows off what the card can do, and at the same time, we get a pretty decent frame rate from it. I've paired the 1050 Ti with my i5-12400F and 32 gigs of 3200MHz DDR4, so not a top-end system by any means, but I think it's more realistic in terms of what you'd likely pair a card like this with, though of course the CPU can handle a lot more. That said, the 1050 Ti should still be able to reach its maximum potential in pairing with this 6-core 12-thread CPU. Here then we're averaging 171 with a 1% low of 121 and a 0.1% low of 94. The 1050 Ti can also handle Fortnite, another online competitive game, and this is exactly the sort of thing that a card like this is still useful for in 2025. This time around we're using the low preset with TAA. We could also use the medium preset, which I actually started off with, though you will find that there are more frequent dips to, or below I should say, 60 frames per second. Here we saw an average of 84 with a 1% low of 53 and a 0.1% low of 45. So it was pretty consistent overall. I'm running in DX12 mode, which means that there were less dips and drops here and there, and I'd certainly recommend playing like this on this old budget GPU, as opposed to cranking the settings up higher. We've got a couple of options here for Kingdom Come Deliverance 2. The first is actually native resolution with SMAA2TX. I'm using the low preset, but I did bump the textures up to high, which may or may not have been a mistake, but from what I could see there actually wasn't much of a performance difference between low, medium and high in terms of the texture quality settings. We saw 33 FPS here, though our percentile lows did leave a little something to be desired. That said, it wasn't the most inconsistent experience in the world, and you should still be able to hit at least 30 FPS most of the time when using a 1050 Ti and trying to play this game, which is quite surprising, to be honest. To get a bit more from Kingdom Come Deliverance 2, we can enable FSR, in this case FSR 3.1, and set it to balanced. I didn't really want to drop any lower than this because it can make text look a little blurry, something that the game actually warns you about. This certainly feels a lot better to play. Not only that, but our percentile lows are improved as well. This time we had next to no stutter when running around this town here, with 1% lows of 33 and 32 respectively, so I'm pretty happy with this result, and because it's FSR 3.1 it looks pretty good as well. I was running around just starting fights with the locals and performance held up pretty nicely. Now GTA 5 Legacy Edition, or the original edition, is more sensible. or it makes more sense to play with a 1050 Ti because it's going to run better, but because GTA 5 Enhanced is the newer of the two and came out recently, I thought we'd test it out here to see if the 1050 Ti could handle it, and surprisingly a 1080p with a minimum preset, which I think still looks pretty good, and FSR 3 set to native anti-aliasing, we saw 62 FPS, so it still looks pretty good and it runs pretty well, and we get some nice percentile lows, so consistency wise it's also very respectable. If you want to give yourself a little more headroom in terms of the performance, well, I'd recommend FSR 3, a balanced mode. Once again, this still looks pretty good, but it's going to bump our average frame rate up a bit, and it's going to mean that we see less dips and drops below 60 FPS. I'm so sorry over there, mate. I just threw a grenade and blew that guy up. My apologies. As we drive off into the distance, you'll see that the frame rate is still hovering at around 60 to 70 FPS, and our card is pretty much using all of the VRAM we have on offer. Again, temperature wise, pretty decent, around 60 degrees, and we're consuming less than 80 watts of power too. It will exceed 75, hence the 6-pin connector on this one, I guess, but to be honest, if I was looking for a 1050 Ti in 2025, I think it makes sense to go for one of the ones without the power connector. That, to me, is where a 1050 Ti makes the most sense, upgrading an old, tired system. Something that's got an ancient PSU with no power connectors. Alright, so this absolute disaster is the Elder Scrolls Oblivion Remastered. I didn't even bother benchmarking this to start with because, as you can see, it didn't run very well at all. This is with the lowest settings, a native resolution, so no upscaling here. This is also with lumen left on and set to low by default because we can't turn it off until we apply a mod or a script. This is how the game looks and runs with that aforementioned lumen mod applied on the Nexus. It's called Lumen Begone. You can either install something or download something, or you can add the script yourself to the engine INI file, which is what I've done. It actually boosted our frame rates up from about 12 to 20, but it's still not playable at native res. I actually began the benchmark then after I had applied some FSR, in this case FSR 3, albeit set to ultra performance mode because this is the only option I could use that would give us at least 30 FPS. Even then, we're looking at 33 as an average, a 1% low of 20 and a 0.1% low of 18. So it's sort of consistent, but I guess it's more consistently bad than anything else, and ultra performance FSR mode, even with FSR 3, doesn't look all that good. As you can see, I'm just wiping out some bandits here. Our frame rate's holding up fairly well, but you may get the occasional dip and drop into the mid-20s. Yeah, certainly a bit more demanding than the original version of Oblivion, that's for sure. Alright, so for Spider-Man 2 here, we'll start off once again with native resolution, albeit at the lowest settings. It is a bit of a disaster, I have to admit. We're seeing 23 FPS on average, even at the absolute lowest settings. I think this game looks okay, but it's clear that we have basically minimised everything. Performance-wise, pretty awful. That frame time graph is all over the place. So what does it take to actually hit at least 30 FPS? Well, let's take a look. Here we are with FSR enabled then, FSR 3.1 this time around, and set to performance mode. We also have ultra performance mode, I believe, that we can enable. Doesn't really make that much of a difference, and it will make the visuals look a lot worse, but I'm talking performance. Performance-wise, doesn't make too many changes. You're still going to see dips and drops below 30 FPS, but it's going to make things even blurrier to look at. So I stuck with performance mode here on the 1050 Ti for about 35 to 40 FPS most of the time. Not a very pleasant experience in a fast-paced action game such as this, but there we are. The 1050 Ti is certainly trying its best, but its best isn't good enough in this one. Now, surprisingly, Cyberpunk 2077 at native resolution runs with between 30 and 40 FPS quite consistently. 37 was the average overall, the 1% low was 30, and the 0.1% low was 27. So really not bad at all with everything set to the lowest settings. I think the game still looks pretty good, and it's nice to see the 1050 Ti handling it with at least 30 FPS, even though we've had to make some significant visual sacrifices. Of course, FSR is here to save the day. We can't make use of DLSS on this old GTX card, but we can, of course, use AMD's Fidelity FX Super Resolution here, which has saved many games today from the perils of the 1050 Ti at native resolution. Here with FSR 3 balance mode, we're getting 48 FPS, even in and around Night City here, as I'm just causing chaos, wiping out some NPCs. We're seeing 39 as that 1% low, and a 0.1% low of 36, so quite consistent, pretty impressive. We could potentially turn a few options up, including the texture resolution, but you may see a few more dips and drops when doing so. Our second to last game is Red Dead Redemption 2 with the ultra textures. Surprisingly, everything else set to lowest. The geometry LOD maxed, the grass LOD set to 2 out of 10, and TAA on and set to medium for 41 FPS. Now bear in mind this still runs at 30 FPS I believe on the newest consoles, so I'm always happy when I see at least 30 FPS on PC for this one, because it's better than any console options that you're going to get thus far. 41 overall with a 1% low of 36 and a 0.1% low of 34. Now if you want to improve things a little bit, again we have FSR to thank here. This uses an older version, so FSR 2, same settings applied, ultra textures as well, but this time we're seeing 49 FPS, so not as much of a bump as other games may offer with FSR enabled, but we're still seeing a nice improvement to that average, as well as our percentile lows as well. It's quite a bit more noticeable though. It's notable that it's enabled, this version of FSR, but it certainly helps us out, and it's worth thinking about enabling in this title. The 1050 Ti, however, holding up fairly well here, so that's nice to see. I'm going to finalise with Clair Obscur Expedition 33. This is a game that I've been hearing a lot about recently. I downloaded it on Game Pass. As you can see, I'm like 5 seconds into the game. I don't really need to expand on this too much because the 1050 Ti is not going to run this one very well at all. Here we have TSR enabled and set to 100% resolution scaling to start with, but let's see if we can bump that performance up a bit by using either TSR or Intel XeSS, the other included upscaling option. Alright, here we are. It's a bit better. Around 30 frames per second. This was a bit of a last minute addition, so I didn't actually do any in-depth benchmarking here, but I don't really feel like I needed to, because soon enough, after a few seconds, that frame rate just started to drop. With the TSR upscaling enabled and set to like the lowest scaling option here, I believe 30%, yeah, it's still not going to run very well, and as I'm sure you'll agree, it's probably not going to be what most would consider playable. We'll actually switch to XeSS scaling now, ultra performance, so like 33% resolution. XeSS and TSR perform quite similar in this game from what I've seen, with XeSS running a little worse. But there we are, the 1050 Ti in 2025. It's not that good, as I'm sure you'd agree. It's going to struggle. It's going to be hit or miss as to whether or not it can play new games with or without FSR as well. Nice to see it holding up in some titles. If you're looking for something that can handle esports games with ease, you know, CS2, Fortnite, maybe you want to play some GTA, yeah, it's going to do fine, but don't expect too much from it, and don't pay too much for it either. But that's all for this one. Let me know your thoughts down below. Thanks for watching as always, and hopefully I'll see all of you in the next one.